Thanks very much, Gilbert, and thanks to you and your team at NAI for putting on this conference. And welcome everyone. I'm pleased to be here to give you an overview of Newrange and what we're up to in Nevada. So of course we'll be making some forward-looking statements and encourage everyone to do their homework before investing. As Gilbert mentioned, we're mainly focused on the Pamlico Gold District in Nevada, which is a high-grade, past-producing district, and it's a very unique opportunity in that the project has been in private hands for more than 120 years. We are operating in two safe jurisdictions, very prolific regions of Nevada and Red Lake, and Red Lake is in northwestern Ontario. That's an earlier stage project that we've picked up fairly recently, but tremendous potential up there as well. And I'll just touch on that briefly, but the main focus will be on Pamlico. We are well financed for the exploration work that we're doing currently with I guess about a little over $2 million in cash and marketable securities. And as Gilbert mentioned, our management team has been highly successful in building companies and finding deposits in the past. And I'm an exploration geologist by training, but I was a co-founder of Great Panther Mining back in 2004, and basically took that company from two people and a concept through to its current status as a mid-tier precious metals producer with operating mines in Mexico and Brazil and another in Peru. So just a brief snapshot on Nevada. It's well known to a lot of people, of course, as being the fifth largest gold producer in the world. Also the third most desirable mining jurisdiction in the world, according to the Fraser Institute. Produced about 5.5 million ounces in 2019 and almost 170 million ounces over a period from 1835 through to 2018. So very, very prolific area. We're located in the Walker Lane Trend of West Central Nevada, which in its own right is a very prolific trend. We have many well-known districts and mines along that trend, from the Comstock Lode up in the northwest near Reno, down through Tonopah and Goldfields and down to Bullfrog and so on. So not to mention, of course, Round Mountain just to the east of us, which at 30 million ounces or so is one of the largest gold mines in the world. So it's a very, very good place to be. As I mentioned, it's a very unique opportunity in that there hasn't really been much in the way of modern exploration done on the project since 1896. And at the time this was in production in the late 1800s, this was known as one of the highest grade gold districts in Nevada. The little inset that you saw on the last slide with the sample of gold did actually come from the property. And that's the type of material that the old timers were looking for. But of course, they weren't aware of the low grade oxide type gold that we're commonly mining in Nevada nowadays. And they never would have had the technology to explore for or to mine and process that type of material anyways. So there's tremendous potential here to expand on what is known at the project. And that's what we've been trying to do is to develop the geological models such that we have a much better understanding of why the gold is there in the first place, because it doesn't fall from the sky. And it had to come from below. So in my experience, whenever you see these types of high grades, it typically means that you're into a much larger district. But having said that, we have done some earlier preliminary studies on the metallurgy, which is extremely good, and we have received up to 97% recovery just through bottle roll leach tests. So we do think this will be a very low cost mining and processing type operation, given that the mineralization is also right at surface. The infrastructure is tremendous. We're only about 12 miles outside of the town of Hawthorne, right off the side of the main highway between Reno and Las Vegas. So very easy access, and power line crosses the property as well. Just a quick look at some of the targets that we had been looking at previously. And some of these, the Merritt area in particular, is very high grade. You can see up to 341 grams per ton in individual samples in the drilling. We sampled one of the underground workings and got 75.5 meters of almost 3 grams gold. And this is right at surface, so very, very easily mineable. There's several other mines in the area along what we call Pamlico Ridge, and another very prospective zone down to the southeast called the Skarn Zone. Now, the main mineralized area that we had been focused our drilling on is just shown here. Some of those names that I just mentioned, Merritt and Pamlico Ridge and so on. This zone is about 850 meters across, and it does contain what most of the gold that is known. And in exploration, you typically work from a known to an unknown. So the focus in the last few years has really been on this area to try and get a good understanding of the style of mineralization, the controls of the gold mineralization, and try to work outwards from there to determine where it's coming from, how we can expand on this, how we can make it bigger. And a couple of things that we have done is just to the north in what's shown here as the central mine area. Just to the east of that, we drilled a few holes, and one hole hit a new style of mineralization that I'll get into in a few moments. But what's important here is that this was a step out of about 1.5 kilometers away from what was previously known. We did find a new gold zone. It's a different type of mineralization, and it really opened up the whole geological interpretation as to what we're actually looking at here on the Pamlico Project. And in doing that, we've also been conducting some geophysics that I'll also get into in a moment, and that allows us to tie in the Lapanta mine, which is again an old past producing mine in the north, along with this, what we call the Skarn Zone down to the south. And we now think that all of these are actually related, driven by a source of the gold that is underlying the central part of the property, which really brings a huge district scale potential to the whole project, because you can see that on the scale here, we're looking at several kilometers across north to south and east to west. So just very briefly, just looking at the areas that we have drilled so far, this Merritt area down in here is where we're getting the very high grades in the underground sampling and in the drilling. And then we drilled along Pamlico Ridge at the Pamlico Mine, Gold Bar Mine, a little bit over in Gold Box Canyon as well, where you can see some of the old underground workings, and the pale patches are from the old mine dumps. At the Good Hope Mine, you can see on the right, we picked up some very good grades in the underground workings. And so all of this material is very, very close to surface. And that's within that orange dashed circle that I showed you a moment ago. So it's very amenable to open pit mining and heap leach processing once we get to that point. But and just sorry, just to accentuate that, this is just a vertical slice, a section through the Merritt area, just to show the relatively flat-lying nature of the mineralization and the fact that it's only about 15 meters or about 50 feet below the surface. So very, very close. Same sort of thing here you can see in the three-dimensional model. That is just a vertical slice that shows the relatively flat-lying nature of the mineralization, and this is essentially the surface just right here. So you can see how close this is to the surface, and very, very easily mineable. So coming back to the bigger picture and the project scale, what we've just been looking at is just over here on the left, what we call the drill area, and then along Pamlico Ridge, Gold Box Canyon. This is the area that we had focused on up until recently. And we had conducted this geophysical survey that you can see here, and I won't get into a lot of detail about this or what it all means, but essentially the reddish colors on this geophysical survey represent sulfide mineralization, typically pyrite, that is buried at depth, and we do think that it is reflecting a large intrusive type body that has probably provided the heat and the source of the gold that we're seeing on the left side here to the west of the property. Now, this is beyond the depth capability of the typical reverse circulation drill that we're using. And before we get to deeper diamond drilling, which is quite a bit more expensive, we wanted to test some of the anomalies that were a little closer to surface. And so in doing that, we tested a few of these other outlying areas on the west side, including these two little fingers sticking up here. And what we found was that these areas do indeed reflect buried sulfide mineralization. So we know that the method is working extremely well. And I'll just focus in on this one line here, we call line 5. And you can see it here. This is the main deeper anomaly that we think is reflecting the intrusive and the sulfides. These holes that we drilled off to the side, this one unfortunately stopped a little bit short. We did start to see some pyrite in the hole, but the upper zone here is barren, and we didn't quite get down to the gold bearing zone. So we have to go back and re-drill that hole. But this one over here is the important one. This is hole 91. And this did intersect gold mineralization likely associated with this little finger coming off here. And as I mentioned, the upper area in here is completely barren of gold. And then you pass through a kind of a geochemical boundary where suddenly the gold mineralization increases quite substantially. And we get a zone through here of about 52 meters of 0.4 grams per ton, which is still very economic in Nevada. And within that, there was a higher grade section of about 18 meters of 3/4 of a gram. And then the gold mineralization continues right to the bottom of the hole, which is kind of implying that even though we haven't reached the better part of the anomaly yet, the fact that this is all strongly mineralized gives us a lot of reason to believe that that this could be also. And so since drilling this hole last fall, we've come back. We've drilled 2 other holes from this same color location so that we can get 3 intersections on this zone and triangulate across it to know which way it's actually oriented. We've drilled another hole through this finger just to the north to see what this represents. And we've stepped back here and drilled a hole down through here as well to try and catch this shoulder on the larger anomaly and to see what what this looks like at depth as well. So it's what all of this is telling us now is that there is a much larger target. This is the zone 91 discovery, and we think that now this is a huge target. The Skarn zone I mentioned is just down to the southeast, the Lapanta mine just off this road up to the northeast, and we're now looking at a target that's at least 1 kilometer wide and probably at least 2 kilometers long. So it really does have significant size potential, and we think there's potential here for a multi-million ounce deposit. So we're very, very excited by this change of events. This just describes the model in a little bit more detail, so I won't go into that, or in interest of time, I'll skip over these numbers as well, and would welcome people to examine this, read these in more detail at a later date, and this presentation will be available for people to have a look at. Just very, very briefly, in the Red Lake area, I mentioned we had another project up there. This is the Red Lake greenstone belt, a very, very prolific belt itself, past production, current production. And we're just over in the greenstone belt just to the east of that, called Birch-Uchi. And our project is up in the north, called North Birch. The Spring Pole deposit that many of you might be familiar with is owned by First Mining Gold at almost 5 million ounces of gold, and they're moving that forward towards a production decision. And our project is actually modeled after a mine in a little farther north in Ontario called Musselwhite, which is an 8 million ounce gold deposit. And it's a very similar style of mineralization as Musselwhite, which is also similar to the largest of this type called Homestake, which is in South Dakota in the US, which was more than 40 million ounces of gold. So these can be very, very large deposits, and our main target is along this particular horizon here, which is 8 kilometers long. There is gold on the south side of it here. This horizon is not exposed at surface. It's covered by overburden, but the trend takes you right into the Argosy mine here, which is a past producing mine, produced about 100,000 ounces at 13 grams. Closed in 1952, and is only about 3 kilometers from our property boundary. So it's very, very close. There's gold in the region, but this 8 kilometer long horizon has never been drill tested. So we'll have lots of news flow over the next several months, drilling and geophysics on both projects. And as I mentioned, we're well financed for that. So good share structure, and we're actually trading probably closer to 1 million shares a day now, so very, very liquid as well. So that's it, Gilbert. Back to you for any questions. Thanks.
Sure, Bob. Just a quick one here from Xiao Yun. He's asking about Nevada. So after so many years of gold mining there in Nevada, do you think there's still enough gold left to discover?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, the fact that this project has not been explored and it's been in private hands for 120 years, and what we're finding now are new discoveries. So, just as an example of that, I worked for a major company back in 1992, 93, and they closed their office in Reno at that time. And they said that everything worth finding in Nevada had already been found. And that was in 1993. So, we all know how much has been found in Nevada since then, and it's tremendous. So exploration is very dynamic, and there's definitely things to be found.
For sure. Just one last question. Let's jump into Clark Y here. The Clark asking, what's the potential of Pamlico? What do you think in your mind? How many ounces of gold there?
Well, I mean, it's still fairly early on, but given the size of the system that we're looking at, I think we could be looking at several million ounces. But to actually quantify it at this point is really impossible. You need a crystal ball.
Sure. Thank you, Bob, for your insights in Nevada.
Thanks very much, Gilbert.